he thought I was telling him some form of lie, and I wasn't. But he hit me with the hose. My hands, was black and blue. My foot, black and blue.
You thought the story of Pastor Kevin O. Smith ended with the night of blood in Albion. But what if I told you the truth went even deeper? Behind the church walls, behind the rituals, he was grooming the youths, draining families of their last dollar and turning obedience into a weapon of control. This is the hidden face of his kingdom. Even after the night of blood in Albion, the truth kept getting darker. Pastor Kevin Smith was not only destroying lives in the church, he was also grooming boys and young men in his private life. Behind closed doors, in the rooms of his home, he kept them close, pulled them away from their families, and made them dependent on him. He promised them blessings, protection, and a place in his so-called heavenly kingdom. But all of it was just another way to control, another way to feed his twisted hunger for power, stripping away their freedom, and binding them to his will. One of those young men was Kevin. Barely 18 years old, Kevin became Smith's right-hand man. Wherever Smith went, Kevin was there. If Smith said, "Do this," Kevin did it without hesitation. His loyalty looked like devotion, but it was nothing more than brainwashing. To Kevin, Smith wasn't just a leader. He was like God himself. And when a man convinces you that he is God, you will follow him even when he is leading you to destruction. Smith used Kevin as a living example of obedience. He made sure the congregation saw how willing this boy was to serve, how quickly he followed orders, how completely he trusted. It was meant to send a message. If Kevin, young and chosen, could give his whole life to the crown bishop, then so should everyone else. But the truth was far from tragic. Kevin was a victim, a boy who should have been discovering life, instead trapped in the cage of a man's manipulation. Inside Smith's home, boys were isolated from their families and from the outside world. Smith knew how to get into their minds, how to make them feel special, chosen, handpicked for greatness. He told them they were called by God, that they had a higher purpose. But all he was really doing was twisting their innocence, stripping away their freedom and binding them to his will. By the time doubt crept in, these young men were already into deep. They no longer knew who they were outside of him. And that was the danger. Smith didn't just build his cult from the church pews. He built it inside his home. He created a private kingdom where boys were molded into servants, where obedience was worship, and where obedience came with fear and threats.
We use a padlock in the natural world to secure or safeguard something of value. To secure or safeguard something of value, we use a padlock. But so as it is naturally, so it is spiritually. If you are building property and a worker of the dark arts comes in the night, because evil people like to work in the night.
Families in the community began to notice their sons disappearing into the church and into Bishop's house, returning distant, cold, and changed. But by then, it was too late. The grooming had already taken root. Kevin's story stands as one of the clearest examples of how far Pastor Kevin Smith's control went.
You couldn't really say anything to the members, so to speak, because if you say anything to any of the members, so to speak, they would basically probably chastise you, or of course kick you out of the church. And mind you, once you leave the church, everybody and them dog basically turn them back against you. you're like no enemy number one.
He was young, full of life ahead of him, yet bent into a servant, enforcer, and a symbol of obedience. He carried out Smith's command not because he wanted to, but because he truly believed he was serving God. And that is what makes the story so chilling. When a man takes the place of God in your mind, you will give him your soul without ever realizing it. This is the second face of Pastor Kevin Smith's kingdom. Not just the bloodshed, not just the rituals, but the grooming of boys, the breaking of young minds, and the turning of innocence into tools for power. He didn't only control men and women in church. He controlled the youths in his home, shaping them to keep his twisted empire alive. Pastor Smith's manipulation extended beyond spiritual control. He systematically exploited the financial resources of his congregation. He demanded that members surrender their first paycheck of the year, a practice he called the first fruits offering. Failure to comply meant public shaming and threats, with Smith proclaiming dire consequences upon their families. One congregant recalled that if the money wasn't paid, Smith would curse you and warn that death or misfortune would come upon your house. He also orchestrated special services where members were instructed to bring specific amount of money, aligning with the calendar, like $219 or $319. These funds were presented as necessary for blessing and spiritual favor.
A few months ago, I lost a very close family member and I was going through depression. I had a former manager that was a member of that church. She advised me that the pastor was a doctor. I decided I needed therapy to cope with, etc. I called and got my date for my consultation. Consultation is $50 USD. Then after that, you will be required to come in for a session, etc. When I got there and spoke to the pastor, the first thing the man told me is that people obey me, and if I get pregnant again, my child father is going to die. I smiled, then he said I should come to grief counseling afterwards. Good thing I had my card with me and his card machine wasn't working. I told him I'll give my manager the money since she's a member, etc. I never went back and I never gave my manager the money cause me no know what kind of effort is that.
The congregation, witnessing supposed miracles, believed these offerings were investments in their spiritual well-being. The financial exploitation didn't stop there. Smith kept meticulous daily records of contribution, treating the church finances like a personal enterprise. He tracked every donation, every offering, every transaction, ensuring that nothing escapes his attention.
They have like pretty much, depending on the nature of the service, you have like different offering service. So you basically start off with $100 seed, then you have $1,000 seed. Then after that, you would have a regular church offering and tithes segment. Then after that, you would have when the pastor, whomever finish preaches, it's called making covenant with the word, offering where you just randomly or if requested, you go up and throw another form of seed, relatively. So in a night or any given night, basically you would say it would have been like 4 different offering that was given in any given night. Rarely it would put on an average at any given night you can make over $150,000.
By doing this, he commodified faith and trust, turning devotion into money and fear into compliance. Through these tactics, Pastor Kevin Smith created a cycle of dependency. Followers gave everything they had: paychecks, savings, sometimes even loans or their children's inheritance. Believing they were obeying God, women often brought their last, the little they had left for food or rent. and gave it to him, trusting that their sacrifice would be blessed. In return, they were fed with cheap tins of food, purchased from their own money. A cruel reminder of how deeply they had been manipulated. Kevon, Smith's right hand, was part of the system. If Smith wanted someone to give money, Kevon would deliver the message, pressuring families to obey. He believed he was doing holy work, but in reality he was enforcing a cycle of exploitation, fear, and blind loyalty. This was how Smith maintained his control, not only through rituals and fear but through finances. He made people weak, dependent, and loyal, turning faith and devotion into tools for his own power.